Welcome to the Business of Us podcast, where we explore the intersection of business, relationships, and family life. This season, we're focusing on the concept of the three mountains of partnership, purpose, and passion, which are the three big challenges that all couples face throughout their relationship. Whether you're scaling your first mountain or you're thinker already at the summit, these episodes will give you stories and strategies and inspiration for the journey. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host and co-conspirator, Jamie Bourne. She's a licensed therapist who works globally with EO and YPO members, entrepreneurs, and helping their families to navigate the unique pressures that come with running a high-performance business. She's a sought-after speaker, retreat leader, and workshop facilitator, and she's passionate about helping entrepreneurs at the intersection of mental, relational, and family wellness.
Thanks, Cameron. It's my honor to introduce my co-host, Cameron Medill, who founded a multi-million-dollar company that he sold to his team in 2019, which led him to realize his true passion is helping people build strong relationships. He has conducted original research with over 600 entrepreneurs and their spouses to better understand how thriving relationships drive both personal well-being and sustainable success. You can read his work at relationshipscienceguy.com. And today he also runs the Happy Couples Project, which is focused on experiential date nights and workshops. Please keep in mind, our podcast is for information only and is not therapy. If you need professional support, we recommend visiting psychologytoday.com. So just a quick overview of this season for all of our viewers. Cameron mentioned earlier that we're exploring the three mountains, which is a framework for entrepreneurial couples and families in terms of the journey that they take. So mountain one is the how, making it work when life and business feel overwhelming. Mountain two is the what, how do we recalibrate after success and asking the question, what's next? And mountain three is who, rediscovering identity, intimacy, and a vision for the future. Today, we are continuing to explore mountain one, the how. And so Cameron, tell us, what is the big question today?
Yeah, today's big question is all about how couples can navigate those moments when life gets really hard and use them to connect even more deeply. I'm really excited to welcome Greg and Diana Keys. I don't think an introduction can really do them justice, but they're two people who've both really changed my life in their own way. When I first met Greg, I was really at an incredibly low point, and he was one of those people who just believed in me and said, shake it off. Let's keep moving forward. And Greg was kind enough to join my advisory board for several years. And then he was kind enough to actually invite me into his home, and that was when I got to meet Diana. And we'll hear a little more about her story, but she really changed the way that I think about food and wellness. And every day when I eat, she is like this single number one influence on kind of how I approach food. So that's a bit of my personal connection. They're both wonderful people. They run a company called Affent, which is an IT outsourcing company. They have numerous interests. They're based down in Newport Beach in California. So they love the water sports thing. They're both committed runners, and they have a really wonderful family and a really unique way of thinking about and approaching family that really kind of was unlike anything else I'd ever seen. So Greg and Diana, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm really, really pleased to have you guys here with us.
Thank you for having us.
The waterworks are already starting, Cameron.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. We'll get to this in a minute. So let's start. Tell me a little bit about the early years, just kind of how you guys met and how business and kids played into that dynamic of juggling life in that early stage of a long-term relationship.
We met in 1990 at work. We're coworkers. And then Greg ended up leaving that job and starting his own consulting business. And so he was doing his own little thing on the side. And as we're dating, all of a sudden, like, he doesn't always have money. And I was like, hey,
Right.
you do all this work and where's your money? And he said, well, I'm really behind on my billing and I don't blah, 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 blah. So I said, hey, I can do that. I can do your billing for you. And so I started doing his billing for him, which just turned into us working together. And then I was still working a full-time job. He was doing the consulting, and we had gotten married. So fast forward 4 years, 5 years, we got married, and I was still working that job. And he said he really wanted to start a business rather than just doing the consulting. And so I think we may had already talked about starting the business, but he got this really good job offer from a company called Cisco. And I was like 7, 8 months pregnant. He goes on this job interview and he comes home with this great offer letter. And I was like, great, when do you start? And he said, I'm not taking the job. And I was like, wait a minute, you got this great job offer. And he's like, and so we talked about it, and he said, it'll crush me to go work, do a job. He said, I really want to try to make the business work. And the business was nothing at that point. It was still kind of struggling. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this. And so for the next few years, we're still in business. So 27 years later, but that's how we kind of got started working together.
Yeah, that offer in 1997 had 2 million of stock shares for Cisco. I don't want to do the math on what that's worth there.
But I think we're much more fulfilled with how our life direction went.
I'd probably be having a different relationship with therapists at this point had I gone that route.
Yeah, maybe not joining a podcast, but
Right.
who knows? All right.
Yeah.
So, I shared a bit about how I know you two personally, and I was really grateful when you guys joined my project, Interview 100 Couples, where one or both of them were entrepreneurs. And this may be the waterworks, but this was the only interview where I found myself tearing up. And so I wonder if we can go back to there. You guys talked about this moment of truth where you were still relatively early in the relationship, and Greg, you were taking the lead on the business, and the business partnership was falling apart, and you kind of you had this moment of a critical choice about how do I move forward as in the business, and then how does that mean we move forward as a couple? So I wonder if you guys could share a little bit about what was that challenge and how did you grow from it?
Yeah. I have a hard time with that one still. I sometimes think someday I'll be able to tell the story without crying. And then I think maybe that's worse. But so we were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. It was all our debt. And really the source of all that was, once we went from, hey, we're bringing in income to what's it mean to have a real business and, got a office and staff and, realizing that at that point we had second kid was born in 2000. The IT world did not melt down, as it turns out, on Y2K. And the stock market didn't do awesome, though. And so business was still awkward, but I was trying so hard to not do it wrong. And, I had, looking back on it, I'm ashamed, but it's also there it is. I was trying to just be the strong guy for everything. I was trying to be the provider, the dad, the CEO. And meanwhile, we're deep in debt. The house is mortgaged out. The credit cards are climbing. And so I was like, hey, I've got 2 business partners in this. Granted, we have initially equal, but not entirely equal partnership. And so I went to them, and in hindsight, I was literally trying to court them to become part of the business and to take on some of the struggle and the debt. And instead, what I was met with was, literally, we can't afford to miss a single paycheck. You have to pay us, or we're going to leave and go work somewhere else. So that, of course, just made the burden feel even heavier because I needed the 2 of those guys to help keep the business going forward. We were all making about the same money each, but I had Vanna, who takes care of that stuff well, and they had wives that didn't. And so after a year and a half, 2 years of trying to court them, it kind of started to go the opposite direction. One of their wives insisted that we were the ones that were abusing them and that the whole thing was faked and just terrible, yucky stuff that's not worth too much detail. It's just painful. So ultimately, the critical, literally one day thing that happened was I went to a forum meeting down south from here a little bit, and I was still being tough and strong. And I think I was, trying to present on a business plan to my group of 10 guys or whatever it was. For better or worse, one of them broke the protocol. Some people who watch this will be familiar with the EO concepts of pretending you're not giving advice. And, which means you're giving advice by saying, in my experience first. But I'll give credit to my friends who said, in this case, more direct. Greg, I don't think that's what's going on. And at the time, again, spiritually, I'm bowed up like I'm ready for a fight. Externally, I don't know what it was like, but they do. So they said, there's something that's going on, man. There's something else going on. You're not addressing it. And was angry, and I pushed back on them. See, I had a valid topic, and you guys should help me. And again, God bless them. They were like, okay. But I left there, skipped the exit to get to the house, skipped the exit to go to the office. Kept driving. An hour later, I'm up in LA, going nowhere. And realized that I can't run away. Where can I go? And pulled over and threw up. Opened the door of the car, puking on the freeway exit. And came home. And came home and cried. And I probably hadn't cried up until then. I was too busy being tough and strong. And that was probably years worth of crying right there. Yeah. To her credit, Dana made all the difference. She said, it's okay. Bankruptcy. So we won't be proud of it, but we don't need the house. We can still work. We won't be able to live here, but we can pay the bills. And we'll figure it out. And that was huge. Up until then, I think my dad always seemed like Atlas. He could always hold up the whole world. And I was pretty sure that was my job. And I was definitely not doing well. And so I'd say that was probably the moment that was like, whoa, I don't have to. It's not just me. And so that gave me the strength to go back. And, at that point it had become an ugly debate with the partners, and they're accusing us of stealing and just terrible stuff. And in hindsight, the one wife, she's a pathological liar. It's nobody's fault. No, it's just stuff happens. So, but that gave me the freedom to go back to the two partners and say, guys, I got a solution to this problem. I'll go to the attorney, I'll get the paperwork done and just sign the whole thing over to you guys and we're done. And I was like, there's $400,000 in debt. I'll keep the debt. I don't care. I know you can't afford to handle it. I'll get a bankrupt or I'll pay it off eventually. So they were not ecstatic, which was weird. And they came back like the next day and said, I don't think we can do that, which was weird for me too, because, back to, I'm faking it, hoping someday I'll make it. To have the two of them say, we can't run the business was hard for me too. Because I'm like, well, I can't run it. It's fucking losing money. Obviously, I'm terrible. So I got the two of them that both said, well, what would you give me for it? And I'm like, what? I'm deep in debt. I have nothing to give you. And ultimately just kind of pulled a number out of my butt and was like, I don't know, 20 or 30 grand instead of the 2 million you think? That's all I can do. And ultimately they both ended up taking 20 or 30 grand each. And the attorneys, I think, made as much or more than they did, just doing paperwork. And that was the end of the partnership. But it was, looking back, it was the beginning of our partnership. See, that allowed me to start crying. She teases me now, but now I cry all the time.
Our roles reversed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I still cry, but
She used to cry a
a
lot.
lot.
Now I at least cry some, more than I should. That was certainly the pivotal moment. From then on, it became easier to ask, what are we doing? Why are we here? Rather than, it probably wasn't true, but up until then, everything felt like, what are you going to do about it? Her asking me, what are you going to do about it? And, even then I wasn't close yet, but I'm still struggling with me being me is good, but I also have a lot of weaknesses, and my weaknesses are her strengths. And I've learned, I think this is true of so many entrepreneurs, but the places I'm weak are the ones that the normal world says you should be strong at. You should be timely, you should be organized, you should be structured, you should all those things. And all those things I'm terrible at. And well, mostly. But not having at least a possibility that it could be okay for us together to be strong was just huge. It's just huge. It just opened up everything to, okay, now we're working on something completely different. The business is not the only thing that defines me. It's not the only thing that says I can provide for my family. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a terrible whatever. So it was a really, really big thing for me.
I mean, I hear that transition from like a me to a we so clearly. And I'm curious, yeah, Diana, is there anything you want to share about your side of this? Because this is the epitome of what we're talking about in this three mountains model of this moment where the first big moment of truth of like, how do we make this work? This doesn't seem like it works. And so I'm curious what you would add about your side of that experience.
Well, I think when he came home and I could see how deflated he was, how he felt, was probably the first time that I was like, oh, he's not Atlas, right? To refer to that. He's showing his vulnerability. And I think that was really the first time I saw it, because he was always so strong. He could get through anything. He always had the answers. Little did I know he was winging it all the time.
But it looked good, yeah, from the outside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't even know I was winging it back then.
I didn't know. So I think that's when we came together and became really a good team. So that's when I jumped really into the business with him. I mean, I was always doing all of the bookkeeping and all of that stuff, but helping him make decisions too.
You're probably gonna need me to redo that whole thing because nobody can understand anything through the tears.
No, not at all. I just really appreciate your candor and willingness to be open and vulnerable and let the emotions of all of this come through for the audience. I think a lot of people experience different iterations of this on this mountain, and these are really hard things to talk about, but they're also critical things to talk about, right? And so being able to come to this space of recognizing that my ongoing attempt at being superhuman all of the time is not reasonable, and that I am in fact human going through this human experience allowed the two of you to really change the conversation in what sounds like a very profound and lasting way for the two of you as a couple. And so I just really appreciate all that you've shared around that. I think vulnerability seems to be something that you both really value, and commitment among the two of you. And so, why is that so important, and how did you get to that belief?
It's funny because as you say that, of course, we just finished reflecting on the inflection point. So I don't know that that's who I have always been. And I wouldn't even necessarily say it's who Diana has always been. I would say in a lot of ways, like all humans, we are a product of who we were born and how we were brought up. And, both of our sets of parents were stoic. And so, when I look back from where I am now, when I met Diana, she had crying fits for no reason at all. And I look back and think how ashamed she must have felt. And she shouldn't have. but we were both trapped in that stoic John Wayne world where crying is weakness and vulnerability is part of that weakness. And I think for me, at least, vulnerability leads to crying. So it's one of the reasons I avoided it. um, but I think the revelation for me was that anything other than vulnerability isn't human. And that became super critical after that point. That pivot point was 2006, I think, if I remember right, 5, 6. And, by 2008 or 9, as the economy's crashing, what a relief to be able to be human, to be able to say, this is scary as hell, and this is painful, and I feel abused and violated and angry and hurt and scared. And to be able to say all that was just huge. And so I think two things that happened in the 2008, 9, 10. One of them was, again, with prompting with my EO group at the time, doing our, as entrepreneurs and groups do, planning stuff. It's like, oh, what do Greg, what will you be accomplishing in the next year? Oh, I'm going to do a good family vacation. So this would have been 2008, I think. And to their credit, they kept pushing. A long weekend? Come on, man. That's bullshit. And it eventually became, make it a week minimum. And I'm like, okay, fine, a week off. And they're like, leave the country. Oh, that's scary. With my family? Okay, but you're among a group of entrepreneurs. I'm like, fuck it, we're doing it. Right? So I come home today and I'm like, hey, we're taking a 2-week vacation somewhere. Where? I don't know yet. I'll tell you when I figure it out. But you don't get to find out how much it costs because it's going to cost a lot of money. And so that became close to a month in Fiji, Australia, New Zealand. And that was another huge pivot. So from, previously 5-day weekends where we mostly went and saw my family, it was the 4 of us. You had to carry everything. So the 2 boys were 8 and 10 at the time. Everybody got a backpack and you had to carry anything you wanted in your backpack. Bigger backpacks than you would travel with, Cameron, but same premise. And, I was, at that point, I had hired managers to run the company, and, there's no reason that it should have been any problem with me being gone. But again, my self-worth was so connected to that thing. It wasn't yet what paid my bills. It was my child, my meaning, my purpose. And the good news is, from that distance, it's not easy to call people. So I think I called one person one time and never again for close to a month. And it was great. It was such a revelation that the few days that I took to go snowboarding with my kids, or the few hours that I took to go surfing with them, that was nothing. This was almost a month just being together. And it was just such a revelation. It was like, wow, this is what I love doing. And the travel, it's kind of a nuisance, but I enjoyed the time more than anything else. And so that became the, if it isn't clear by now, I am a triple entrepreneur, all the ADD, but also all the problem solving. So that clicked into my problem solving and said, if this is what life is about, then I got some work to do. And so over the next couple of years, I stripped back the company and let go of the managers and said, I don't need this to be a big entity. It doesn't define me. It pays my bills. And I'm not terrible at running the business. And I think if I can focus on maintaining good relationships with the people that I care for, and if I don't care for you, but I need you for employment, that's fine too. But that was just a huge change. And so that was late December 2009 through January of 2010, or would have been a year after that. I don't know. Anyway, somewhere in that time frame. And, that was, the economy was starting to recover, but we had no business dropping $30,000 when we previously a vacation meant wondering if you should pay for the $200 worth of gasoline. Um, but yeah, that was another huge pivot moment, and it redirected what I felt priorities were. And it was really right about that time that I also had all these other ahas. Some of them are just my character, of course, but somebody says, "What do you do?" And I started answering, I rock climb and I snowboard, I mountain bike, and I love hanging out with my family. And of course, that always became the look on their face. At which point it's like, yeah, I know I'm fucking with you. You want to know how I pay my bills? This is how I pay my bills for me. So
I I love that too, right? Because it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable, it sounds like, paved this path. And when you're vulnerable and paying attention to those things and recognizing what makes this business sustainable, how do I start to identify myself outside of this entity? It's just a game changer. And not everybody, I don't think everybody understands that quite yet. And I think people are seeking that in some ways without even recognizing that that's what they're seeking. So it sounds like vulnerability really opened that up for you. One of the other things, Diana, that I understand is that you also struggled with an autoimmune condition for a number of years. And so I'm curious about that for you and how that impacted your relationship.
So I think I probably am still struggling with it. But it started in 2004, 2005.
got bad.
It got bad. It was a little underlying there, and it was a skin condition that just like got really bad. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the stress of the business and family, and we chose to homeschool the kids, so there was a lot of stuff going on there. But the one thing that I had was always Greg was very supportive. When I told him I went to the doctor and they said, "Oh yeah, you have this autoimmune disease and you're just going to control it with steroids for the rest of your life." And I was like, "Whoa, I'm not doing that." And I said, "I want to go seek alternative help." And he was like right on board. And even though it's all money out of pocket, I was spent a lot of money on acupuncture and herbs and kind of delve into that whole health community, which I think changed all of our lives in for the better because we were eating like traditional Americans prior to that. And we weren't eating very healthy. So I continue to work on that, and I get little flare-ups when things get stressful. So yeah.
She did a really good job dealing with it and still does. There were some conflicts. So one of the things that the Chinese doctor said was, first it was, "I want you to eat nothing but oatmeal for a month." And honestly, that was going to be just her, so I didn't care. But after that, he started adding things back and ended up with her doing no meat and, other dietary adjustments. And that set off bells for me. I was like, wait a minute, I eat In-N-Out burger 5 days a week. Like, don't fuck with my diet. And she was good enough to just take that in stride too, which in hindsight, I wish I had been more supportive. But
Ironically, now if I do give him anything with meat in it, he usually complains that there's meat in it.
yeah, times change. There's also some funny stuff in there too, though, because she started, we're going to be eating, some beans and rice and stuff. And I'm like, shit, I came from a poor family. We grew up with beans and rice and government cheese. So I really don't care. I think it's worth noting too that she says it started then, but as she changed her diet, it cured issues that she'd had since she was a child. So she had skin conditions that her parent or her mom and her sister still have that went away after that. There's still other challenges and other issues, but I think it also, I don't love this statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. Every one of those steps that was outside the norm drove us closer together. Because even when I've got my forum to try and be understanding, you can hear it in their voice, like, "Oh, isn't that great, Greg?" Like, I know I'm a fucking weirdo. I know we're unschooling our kids. I know that we're eating weird and we're skipping the steroids and going to the acupuncture. And so that, again, left it as This is us.
I want to sort of build on that. That seems like a perfect segue of, I feel like almost the theme of this is thinking about a relationship by design versus by default. Um, again, it was one of the things that really was transformational for me when I met you. Like, I remember, I mean, I live in Portland, Oregon, right? We're pretty hippie, at least relative to the rest of the country. And I remember spending a weekend at your house and eating all of Diana's, unprocessed, tasty food. And literally being on the flight home on Alaska Airlines, Monday morning or Sunday night, and being like, my God, I feel better. Like, I was a generally healthy person, at least by the, low standards of a lot of us here in America, but that alone made a difference. And so I feel like maybe that was almost like that was the head fake. By the way, welcome to new guest. Is that Owen there?
This is Owen.
You say
Hi,
hello.
Owen.
Say morning.
So you guys had this whole, like, that was almost like the head fake. Like, the real thing I was learning from you guys was, what does it look like when you design your life rather than just letting it happen by default? And we won't go into all the details, but as you mentioned, you unschooled your kids for a big chunk. You have 2 kids in their 20s living with you, your daughter-in-law, 2 grandkids now. It's like this beautiful community you've built. What advice would you have to other entrepreneurial couples who are maybe in the thick of one of those moments about how do we make it work? Or maybe they're just at a point of disconnect about how they can design their life and their relationship, to look at it differently. I mean, maybe by having a baby join everything, because it's just like every time a baby turns a
It might actually have been perfect.
yeah, it's like a joy bomb. So, but yeah, just any advice or thoughts for other couples navigating entrepreneurship in a relationship to design their lives rather than let them happen by default.
So I had read some of your questions and thought a little bit, but as you were saying it, the way you just said it reminded me that same time frame where I was taken over without the partners and we were becoming a team and I was learning how to run a business instead of be its primary worker or wherever. I slowly developed this thing that was like, well, what matters to me? And it ultimately became very much a plan, but it had to be one page because I can't handle more than that. And the interesting part was that, this is 2008, 9, 10-ish. And it ended up going through the typical stuff, very much like your mountains, the how and the why and the where and the who and all this crap. But the one that ended up surprising me was the who ended up at the top of the list. And so why was the top, right? And this was probably about the same time, but maybe, probably similar time frame to Simon Sinek and other people, broadcasting their purpose-driven why crap. And that wasn't working for me because I was trying to understand what's why me. If I feel like my calling is to change the world, then that's easy. But I didn't. And so the why for me led to who. And the who was, who am I? And that set off some difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't embraced me yet. I was still living bifurcated. I was a robot directed by the intellectual me that determined what the optimal performance would be to win or succeed or whatever it might be. So that premise of looking at everything from who on down and saying, who am I and why do I do what I do has everything to do with who I am. And realizing that challenge thing for me is just massive. I need a huge challenge. But it also gave me insight to go, oh, board slapper, that's everybody else too. And so Diana's who is so different than mine. Mm-hmm. And realizing that, her supportiveness is as important as my drive. And finding a way for them to complement and build one story became a whole intellectual challenge on its own. One of the coaches that I was working with at the time was coaching my team and me as well. But I remember him once a week, he'd pop into the office, we're still in the office at the time, and look at my whiteboard and he's like, "Do you add anything to that list yet?" And I'm slowly building out this how I will live my life kind of thing on my whiteboard. But that life with intention drove everything to where we are now.
Mm.
Because that deeper look at who creates why, creates how, creates what, changed everything. Who am I? Do I care if I'm the Bill Gates of the IT world? I actually don't care. Why do I enjoy this stuff, the IT stuff? Well, because I understand it and I'm good at it. That makes me feel fulfilled. The challenge itself is the largest portion of the reward for me. And that's in a revelation I think you and I have talked about before, Cameron, that it turns out that I don't need to be the best or to win. I just want a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned how, with a number of my business owner friends, I've learned that we're different that way. I want the challenge, and I really don't care when we get to the end. And most of my business owner challenge friends are actually the opposite. If there's a shortcut to win, they rather win. And I'm like, oh, hell no, I'd rather suffer.
I love that. I mean, that why leads, that why leads to who, right? That's at the pinnacle of all of this.
Exactly.
And well, yeah, so that's how you got to it, and then you went back the other way. I'd love to switch gears, and then Diana, I'm going to give you the final word, but I want to do some rapid fire questions. So, Greg, I'm going to flip these. What's your favorite word? If you had to have one word printed on a hat, I know, right? Is that evil, Diana? Is that not? All right, I'm going back. Chris, okay, Greg, if you were going to have dinner with one historical person, who would it be? We're back on script.
The one that comes to mind right now is Benjamin Franklin, because I read a biography on him recently, and I really enjoyed the concept of who he is.
I love it. All right, Diana, if you had to share what your favorite word is and put it on a t-shirt for the next 365 days that you wore, what would it be?
Rah-rah.
Rah-rah?
Rah-rah. Because that's what Owen calls me.
Your grandson. I love that. Greg, what is the best advice you've ever received?
When I read that question, the first one that popped in my head was one that's funny and weird. My dad told me a long time ago that one of the core problems with men and women comes down to intercourse. He said the dictionary tells you that intercourse is a sexual act as well as conversation. And he said the irony of it is men have conversation to get sex and women have sex to get conversation. And that actually became really enlightening to me as I tried to create a better relationship with my wife, because I was like, I wonder if he's right.
Oh, your dad. All right. Diana, what is a place you'd like to visit that you've never visited?
The answer has an S at the end. National parks.
National parks. That's a good one. So many of them. All right.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Tell us
Well,
what.
I was going to say, because Greg created this amazing space for us. He has a van that he converted into a little RV. And that's one of the things that I love doing with him. We just leave the house and go somewhere. And sometimes we don't even know where we're going. We just go, and sometimes we end up at a campsite, and sometimes we end up on the end of a dirt road. And it's been great.
I love that. All right, let's do our final take. Diana, I'd love to know, is there anything you didn't get to or anything you'd especially like to reiterate to our audience?
A real quick little rewind so we homeschooled the kids. And one of the things I always said about homeschooling was I only get them for 18 years. And so I want to maximize my time with them. I want to know who they are and all of this. I didn't want to send them off to school for 8 hours a day. And then they graduated, and they're now 25 and 27. They've never left the house. We built a tiny house in the backyard for our 25-year-old because he couldn't live with us and we couldn't live with him, like in the same quarters. Our older son, his wife moved into the house she moved in before they got married. They got married, and now they have 2 children, and we are co-parenting or co-grandparenting with them.
So good.
I couldn't have planned this life if I tried. And we are beyond thrilled to be doing this and hope it never ends, but someday it might.
I love that's a perfect note to end on of if you can't live with them anymore, build a tiny house in the backyard.